So today, I'm making a video on my favorite turbo, the RHB Super 6. Better be my favorite turbo because I designed it. So let's start off by what is it, first of all. It's a 59 millimeter, 9-blade turbo with a water-cooled billet, triple ball bearing, center section, all that fancy stuff. Spins just like any other turbo, but with a little bit less friction and a little bit more shaft support in each direction. Uses TD06 housings on both sides, so that it has the V-band for TD06 and this side for it too with the retaining clip. The reason for that is the retaining clip is very nice and the TD06 housings are also very nice, especially when you modify them the way I have with this T51 R mod, anti-surge like you don't normally see it. Anyway, TD06 housings are very nice because you can get a lot of variety for the turbine housings, twin scroll, internally gated, externally gated, all that stuff, and then you can easily machine IHI housings to fit onto this core. So there's that. So with all that said, this is basically just a turbo that makes up to 700 horsepower and is more compact and lighter than pretty much everything out there. The reason it's called the Super 6 is because it uses a TD06H turbine wheel, and then it makes the TD06 housings. It's called Super because I designed this compressor wheel with a super strong hub to take speeds in excess of 250,000 RPM, and the bearing system is made to work with that and also take those speeds. It has a very high exducer tip, so it can actually flow air at those speeds as well. And it also has very upright blades, so it can take compressor surge, it can take whatever you really throw at it. It's just a beefy unit that can make up to 700 horsepower in such a tiny package. So here's the story behind the Super 6 and how it came to be. When I started the saw build, I started with this. This is a TD04 HL 20G, so it's got a gigantic compressor wheel on it with the custom nut and whatnot. I made an adapter for this to fit into one of these compressor housings. So picture this big old compressor housing with this tiny core. When I first dynoed the race car, I made a 415 wheel horsepower on this thing. 414 point something. It was almost maxed out, not really, but it was running pretty good. And in that moment, I learned that you really did not need a big turbo to make big power. 415 is a lot of power to be pushing through this turbine, and to be honest, scientifically most of it's going through the wastegate when you have a wheel this small. So quickly after making 415 horsepower and then going to the track and then testing the car ran great, everything was great, but I needed more power. I realized to go podium in unlimited time attack, I'm going to need like 650 horsepower at the end of the day, which I couldn't get from a TD04, it was too small. So then the question became, what's the smallest turbo I can make 650 horsepower on? So what I did was I built a TD06 actually, a 20G, so this is what the center sections look like on those. Just an iron center section, nothing crazy. So basically similar looking to this, except with this iron center section in the middle. Turbos worked fine. I made like 580 wheel on one of them and then it ran great. But the problem is the Saab used to get bad oil starvation, and then I was running like close to 30 pounds to make that amount of power. And then with oil starvation, you get oil contamination and a whole bunch of ugly stuff. So what was happening was I was actually damaging the thrust bearings and it was getting in and out shaft play. If you don't know what a thrust bearing is, basically it's a brass bearing basically that sits inside the center section of a journal bearing turbo, and then it basically stops the shaft from moving in and out. So it has this collar that goes on the shaft, and it's basically a hydrostatic bearing that, you know, stops the shaft from moving in and out, similar to how a crankshaft is. So after roasting a few thrust bearings on this design with, again, high oil temperatures, high boost, high shaft speeds because I was wringing the crap out of it, and then oil starvation, I realized I can just design my own bearing system. I've rebuilt several hundred turbos at this point. I can just design something and try to make something better. So then my idea was, hey, I can make a little cartridge, machine this out, like bore this out, and then push this cartridge in there, see how it's got that hole in that dowel pin, and just assemble this, and then I can have a ball bearing TD05, TD06 center section. So that worked. This video on my channel is actually when I was running one, just testing at the track. Doing some stress testing, I guess you could say, and these worked, except the only problem is when you bore this out to the right size to fit this, the center section would crack eventually because it's just so thin there and it's cast iron. So then I realized quickly, okay, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna actually just need a whole billet center section of my own. So that's what I did. The triple ball bearing billet 6061 center section was born, and then the bearing insert looked like this. So basically it has two bearings on this side and then one bearing on this side. So now I got the bearing system down. Now I realized, okay, 580 wheel is what I was making, spinning the crap out of the 20G. I need a wheel that can actually, first of all, take that RPM, or like take even more RPM, because there's two ways you can make more boost on a turbo. You can spin it faster, or you can have it do more work for the same speed that it's doing. You can spin a turbo faster within limits. Of course, once you spin it too fast, and you start running into air compressibility issues, because now you're actually exceeding Mach speeds with the blade tips and the airflow. So there's only a certain amount of air you can flow through a certain diameter, but we're not at that limit yet at all. So I realized I could make a compressed wheel that's slightly bigger with good enough blades, a good enough tip, and a strong enough hub, and then I can just spin it harder and make more power. And then that's what I did with the Super 6 wheel. So this wheel I actually designed early in 2018 and then had them made later in the year. It was a long time doing FEA and CFD just to get it to actually work. Once it did work and I put it in the car, oh yeah, did they work. So that's how I got to that point with these turbos. I still run one on the race car now. Again, I was only really running that stuff for myself, and then I finally started marketing them and selling them and all that end of 2019. So that's more than a whole year later of testing and trying stuff and whatnot, and assembly stuff. If you look at professional motorsports teams and race cars and all that stuff, you'll notice that they always run the smallest turbo they can get away with. Running a bigger turbo would mean you're sacrificing a little bit of throttle response and getting a bit of extra lag just to have a bit more headroom for power. But it's almost slightly better lap time wise and speed wise to just run a smaller turbo slightly out of its efficiency range and then pick up all that mid-range torque and boost threshold that you lost, or you would have lost with the bigger turbo. So that's exactly what the Super 6 is, except it's durable. So it's made to actually be run far out of its efficiency range in order to make the horsepower number that you need. Like, I have a customer running like up to 60 pounds of boost on this. I run up to 40. Like, as it is, I run up to 35 on my daily driver. So it's really a robust turbo. So all that greatness, everything aside, unfortunately I've decided to discontinue these, ultimately because they take far too long to assemble. They take hours to put together, as opposed to other turbos that take minutes, and then the rest is all QC. So these are water cooled, but they did not ever have to be water cooled. What I was doing is basically mimicking the design of the original TD05 and adding water cooling in. So if somebody already had one, TD05 or 6, they could just drop this in, hook the water lines up, and just be on their way. I personally have never run water cooling on these, and I've tested them without it. I've put temperature stickers on them. I've shut it down with the turbine housing glowing red hot. These do not need water cooling. They don't burn oil the way a cast iron core does at all. the aluminum transfers heat so quickly that it's not needed. The problem is, to get water cooling on a center section like this, you need some crazy inner cartridge like this. So these intricate machining marks aren't just there to be pretty. That's actually for an O-ring that has to get put in there very carefully. So those O-rings need to go in. You actually have to freeze this cartridge, and then you have to heat this up super hot and then use an arbor press and push this in ever so gingerly so that you don't tear an O-ring. Once it's in there, if you have to take it out, it rips the O-ring, so you have to re-O-ring it and put it back in. But before you even get to that step, there's shims that go behind these bearings to get the right amount of end play. So that's fine, it sounds easy, but the thing is you have to assemble everything, check the end play, take it back apart, add shims, check it again, take out shims. There's actually an extra sleeve, this, that goes in behind the bearing, so you can actually fine tune the end play. So assembling this alone was a pain, and then getting it into the cartridge was a pain, and then also the parts. The parts now, since these turbos ran on custom shafts, which is like this. This is a custom 8mm shaft. A normal TD05 actually has a different shaft to those. So I had to get these made specifically for RHB, and then reordering them was an expensive task because it was always done in bulk. And then with the way volumes are going and the way the economy is going, selling that bulk is not always easy nowadays. I hope you can understand that. To sum it all up, the main issue with these turbos is that they are hard to assemble. For no reason, because I actually have a better design that I will be talking about in another video, and it is a dream to put together. Like, let me show you how easy it is to actually put together. Here's the new cartridge, RHB Evo. There it is, it's assembled. Now just put the back plate on, put the wheels in, and it's done. From the customer's point of view, these turbos are perfect. They do what they say they're gonna do, and they run great. And they last pretty much forever, as long as you don't suck debris through them. On my end, the guy who's actually manufacturing these, it really takes a lot out of you when it takes hours to assemble a turbo, especially when you have multiples to put together. Then it can take like an entire week of work days to get those turbos finished. It just doesn't make sense to be putting that much work into something when you're only going to be netting a certain amount of money. And then because of inflation in the economy and the cost of each part, your profit is evaporating at the same time. So then you have to ask yourself, is it really worth it to put myself through this, to put all this together, or is it worth it to design something that gets the same job done, but is a lot easier to put together and actually works a little bit better? So anyways, thanks for watching. The rise and the fall of the Super 6, maybe. Not really the fall, just a discontinuation. Here's a promo code to get a discount on one of these if you want, because there are 4 left, and then they are gone. They are gone. So don't miss your chance. This might be a piece of history. To me, it's a piece of history. I'm selling 4, but I still got one for myself, so it's fine. It's okay. Don't cry. But anyway, thanks for watching.